Hey there, and welcome to our deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin. We've got a really interesting stack of material to work with here.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty good mix.
Yeah, there's like some quotes directly from Camblin, a really comprehensive biography, and even a YouTube video breaking down one of his paintings. It's called Primavera.
Oh, wow.
I'm excited to dig in and see what we can uncover about this guy.
Yeah, it's a fascinating collection. I think it'll give us a good look into how he saw the world, both as like an artist, but also just as like a thinker.
Yeah, right. Okay, so, we were looking through this book of his quotes, and some of them are just like, whoa.
Yeah.
So let me just read you one. It says, "Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years, perhaps."
Mm.
Like, what do you even do with that?
Well, I mean, that's Camblin in a nutshell, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got that dry wit,
Yeah.
but also like a deeper awareness of time and impermanence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like he's making us laugh at the absurdity of it all, but also acknowledging that like nothing really lasts forever.
Right. And then there's this other one. "I will stick with common sense and try for the perfectly average view of the universe."
Hmm.
It's almost like he's rejecting, like, grand narratives or extremes,
Yeah, totally.
Just trying to find a balance in the ordinary.
Yeah, and I think that's a key insight into his philosophy, and probably his art too. It reminds me a lot of those Zen teachings, about finding enlightenment in everyday things, like
Right.
washing the dishes or sweeping the floor.
Okay, so we're already starting to see some hints of Zen philosophy in here, but then there's this other quote that, like, totally contradicts that whole common sense thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it says, "The sixth sense is to be without a doubt, senza dubio, no doubt." It's like he's saying, trust your gut, even if it doesn't make logical sense.
Interesting. So you've got that tension between intuition and reason.
Hmm.
Zen Buddhism isn't just about like emptying your mind. It's also about cultivating a deep inner knowing that goes beyond just intellectual understanding. It's that aha moment that can come when you just quiet down all the mental chatter and you tap into something a little deeper.
Okay, so maybe those seemingly contradictory quotes are actually like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. It's like he's
Yeah.
holding both of those perspectives in tension, finding that balance between the rationale and the intuitive.
Yeah.
And I think that comes through in his artistic process too.
Okay, so we've got these little glimpses into Camblin's mind through his words, but we also have this biography that kind of lays out his career in a very structured way. It
Yeah.
lists all these exhibitions he was a part of.
Yeah, and it's impressive. It shows he wasn't just some like solitary artist working alone in his studio. He was very much engaged in the art world of his time,
Yeah.
exhibiting with some huge names.
Yeah, there are so many listed here. It's hard to even know where to begin. There's the 62nd American Exhibition at the Art Institute of Chicago in 1957, and then the Fulbright Painters Exhibition that traveled to different museums in 58.
Right. I think the one that really stands out to me is Extraordinary Realities at the Whitney Museum in 1973. It just seems to really capture what Camblin was all about. Finding the extraordinary within the ordinary,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of perception.
Okay, so instead of getting bogged down in this laundry list of shows,
Right.
maybe we can use that one exhibition as a lens to focus our exploration.
Yeah,
It seems like a good entry point to understanding his artistic vision.
definitely. And the title itself is just so evocative. It suggests that he wasn't just trying to represent the world as it appears, but to reveal something deeper,
Right.
something hidden beneath the surface.
Okay, so how do we connect those cryptic quotes and that intriguing exhibition title to, like, the actual art he created? I'm guessing this is where the YouTube video about Primavera comes in.
Absolutely. Primavera is one of his most well-known and analyzed pieces, and the video you've shared goes into some really interesting interpretations of it.
Oh, cool.
It's like we finally get to see these philosophies in action.
Okay, let's dive in then. I'm really curious to see how he brought those Zen ideas, that sense of balance and intuition, into a visual form.
Yeah, me too.
Mhm.
I think we'll start to see how he wove together all these seemingly different elements, the humor, the philosophical depth, the artistic vision into something truly unique
Yeah.
and compelling.
Okay, so we're diving into this YouTube video about Camblin's Primavera, and it seems like a pretty important piece for understanding his artistic vision.
Hmm.
The video talks about, like, the style, the composition, and how it connects to both Botticelli's Renaissance masterpiece and Zen philosophy.
Right?
It feels like a lot to unpack.
It is, but it all comes together really beautifully.
Okay.
Remember we were talking about Camblin finding that balance between the ordinary and the extraordinary?
Yeah.
Well, this painting is a great example of that.
Okay, so walk me through it. What did you notice about the painting, like, visually?
Well, first off, you can definitely see that he's drawing inspiration from Botticelli's Primavera.
Mm.
Both paintings were about spring,
Mm.
renewal,
Mm.
celebration of nature. Right.
But Camblin's version is way more abstract.
Ah,
The lines are fluid, almost ethereal, and the figures seem to kind of merge with the landscape. It's
Yeah.
not a literal depiction of spring. It's more like he's evoking the essence of it.
the video mentions that he used a really delicate brushwork, almost like watercolor.
Yeah.
Does that tie into his philosophy at all?
Oh, absolutely. That watercolor-like quality emphasizes how fleeting spring is, its delicate beauty.
Right.
Remember that quote about nature not hurrying, but everything getting accomplished?
Yeah.
It's like Camblin is capturing a moment in time, knowing it will inevitably change and fade, encouraging us to appreciate the beauty of it while it lasts.
So even the technique he uses contributes to the overall message.
Exactly. It's not just what he paints, but how he paints it.
Right.
And that brings us to the Zen influence. The video talks about how the painting connects to certain hexagrams from the I Ching.
Now, for anyone who isn't familiar with the I Ching, it's an ancient Chinese text that uses these hexagrams, which are like combinations of lines, to offer guidance and insights into different situations.
So it's kind of like a divination tool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People consult it for wisdom about change, transformation, the cyclical nature of things.
Right, and Camblin was really into those ideas.
The video specifically mentions the hexagrams for revolution and approach, which both resonate with the themes of spring and renewal.
Okay, so revelation is probably referring to the transformative power of spring, like shedding the old and making way for the new. And approach suggests like a new beginning, a sense of hope and possibility.
Yeah, exactly. And what's cool is that Camblin doesn't just like slap these hexagrams onto the canvas, you know?
Right.
They're subtly woven into the composition, the symbolism, the overall feeling of the piece. It's like he's using them as a framework to explore these really universal themes, but in a way that's totally personal.
So it's not a literal translation of the I Ching. It's more like a conversation with it, a way of integrating those ancient ideas into his own artistic vision.
I think that's a great way to put it. And speaking of integration, remember that, quote, emphasis on the drawing as nonverbal. Emphasis on the concept as nonverbal.
Yeah.
This is where it all comes together.
You're saying Primavera is an example of that nonverbal communication.
Absolutely. The video even talks about the Zen concept of nu, or emptiness, and how it relates to the painting. Now, mu can be kind of a tricky concept.
Yeah.
But it's not about like a literal void or nothingness.
Okay.
It's more about the idea that things are empty of like inherent fixed identities.
Okay.
They're fluid, interconnected, constantly changing.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection, the way those figures in Primavera sort of dissolve into the background, the blurred lines between humans and nature.
Right.
It's like he's visually depicting that interconnectedness.
Exactly. It's a visual representation of mu, a way of expressing this profound concept without using words. And it ties back to that idea of balance we were talking about before. Camblin is finding that balance between the figure and the ground, the subject, and the environment, alluding to a deeper connection that exists beneath the surface.
It's like he's inviting us to see the world differently, to look beyond the labels and categories we put on things and experience that underlying unity.
Precisely. And that's a very Zen perspective, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
To see how everything is connected, to let go of those rigid distinctions we make in our minds.
Right.
It's a way of experiencing the world with more openness, more acceptance, more wonder.
It's making me think about that quote, find something in nature that completes you and then surrender. Maybe that's what Camblin was doing with his art. Finding that sense of completion in nature, surrendering to its rhythms and expressing that experience through his paintings.
I think that's beautiful, and it really speaks to that deep connection between his philosophies and his art. They're not separate things.
Yeah.
They flow into each other, they inform each other, they enrich each other.
It's interesting because in some ways, Camblin's work seems almost contradictory.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have this focus on stillness, on observing the natural world, embracing the present moment.
Yeah.
But then there's this playful, almost rebellious spirit, this willingness to challenge conventions and push boundaries.
That tension is what makes him so fascinating.
Yeah.
And it might be the key to understanding his legacy, how his work continues to resonate with people today.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dig into that legacy.
Yeah.
What is it about Camblin's art and ideas that still speak to us even all these years later? So we've been talking about Bob Camblin's philosophies, his art, this interesting mix of Zen wisdom and a playful, almost rebellious spirit. But what about his legacy? What makes his work still relevant today?
Hmm. I think looking back at everything we've discussed, one of the big things about Camblin is his ability to bridge the gap between the everyday and the profound.
Right, we've seen that throughout this deep dive.
Yeah.
He finds those moments of zen in nature in a fleeting glance in the way paint meets canvas.
Yeah. Exactly. He encourages us to slow down, pay attention, find beauty and meaning in the impermanence of it all. And in a world that's so dominated by speed and technology and instant gratification, that message feels more relevant than ever.
Yeah, it's like he's offering an antidote to the chaos, a way to find some stillness amidst all the noise.
And it's not about escaping the world or rejecting technology altogether. It's about engaging with it in a more mindful way, you
Yeah.
know?
Right, which brings us back to one of Camblin's most thought-provoking quotes. The artist today is the only free agent. That one's really been sticking with me this whole time. What do you think he meant by that?
Hmm. I think he was challenging us to define freedom for ourselves, not in terms of like external constraints, but in terms of our own inner compass.
Hmm.
Our willingness to create, to explore, to express ourselves authentically.
So it's not about rebelling against society or throwing out all the rules.
Right.
It's about finding that space within ourselves where we can be truly free to think, to feel, to create.
Exactly. And that applies to everyone, whether you're an artist or not. It's about recognizing that we all have that capacity for creativity, for self-expression, for shaping our own reality.
That makes me think back to the biography and how it lists all of Camblin's accomplishments. But it also mentions those periods where he seemed to withdraw from the art world to focus on his own exploration.
Right.
It's almost like he needed those periods of retreat to reconnect with his inner compass, to recharge, you know?
Yeah, it's like he had to step back from the demands of the world and listen to that inner voice, that creative impulse.
And have the courage to follow it, even if it leads you off the beaten path.
Exactly.
I love that it's a really empowering message. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin, we want to leave you with one final thought. Remember that, quote, "The artist today is the only free agent." Well, we encourage you to think about how that idea might apply to your own life, whether you consider yourself an artist or not.
Maybe it's about finding that freedom in your work,
Hmm.
your relationships, the way you move through the world.
Or maybe it's about discovering your own unique form of creative expression, whether it's through painting, writing, gardening, or simply living a life that's authentic to you.
Whatever it means for you, we hope this deep dive has given you some new thoughts, some fresh perspectives, and maybe even inspired you to explore Camblin's work a little more.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. It's been a fascinating exploration, and we're sure Camblin's legacy will continue to inspire and provoke for many years to come.